It began at 4:17 a.m. over the Pacific. A commercial pilot halfway through a routine flight path radioed something no control tower ever expects to hear. "Tower, I think the sky has stopped moving." At first, air traffic control assumed turbulence or an instrument malfunction. But then 6 more pilots flying over different regions reported the same impossible phenomenon. The clouds were frozen. Not drifting, not reshaping, not evaporating, just suspended, like someone had paused the atmosphere. By sunrise, thousands of passengers on the ground confirmed it with their own eyes. Parents pointed phones at the sky. Children whispered as they tugged their sleeves. Birds hung mid-air like sculptures. Plain vapor trails curved halfway, then stopped. The wind vanished. The world's biggest weather systems had become a photograph, and nobody understood why. Within 2 hours, the first global alert was issued: a planetary atmospheric anomaly. The statement reassured the public that meteorologists were investigating, but everyone knew what that really meant. They had no idea. In Tokyo, Professor Aso, the world's leading expert on atmospheric physics, reviewed the satellite feed frame by frame. He zoomed into the cloud banks above the Pacific. His breath caught. The clouds weren't just frozen. They were frozen in a pattern, one so precise it looked artificial. A spiral, a perfect geometric spiral stretching hundreds of kilometers. A shape no natural weather system could form on its own. A shape seen before, but not in the sky. Aso opened a second window on his computer. He imported a diagram from an archive most scientists considered fringe: the Lagrange harmonic map, a theoretical blueprint of gravitational still points in space. The frozen cloud spiral matched it exactly, as though the entire atmospheric layer had aligned itself with something invisible, something outside the planet. Meanwhile, social media was exploding with theories: divine signs, hologram malfunctions, alien broadcasts. But one particular video went viral instantly. A fisherman from Chile filmed a seagull floating mid-air. He tossed a pebble toward it. The pebble bounced off the frozen bird and veered sideways as if sliding along a magnetic wall. Physicists around the world froze the clip. A magnetic wall in the sky? But the anomaly wasn't magnetic, and it wasn't electrical. It wasn't anything Earth had ever displayed. Then something even stranger emerged. People monitoring the cloud spiral noticed a faint pulse, like a dim flicker, running through the frozen formation every 61 seconds. A wave, a signal. A countdown. Aso ran automated analysis. After 3 pulses, the computer detected a repeating sequence embedded in the flicker, something barely measurable, yet unmistakably structured. A digital signature, Aso whispered into the empty lab. Someone or something is writing into the atmosphere. And for the first time since the phenomenon began, he realized the most terrifying possibility. The sky hadn't frozen by accident. It had been paused on purpose, by something powerful enough to touch the entire planet in a single breath. The frozen sky lasted exactly 7 minutes and 19 seconds. No more, no less. At 4:24 a.m., without warning, the world snapped back into motion. Wind returned. Birds dropped from their suspended positions and flapped away in panic. Clouds resumed drifting as if nothing had happened. But the damage was already done. Every sensor, radar, telescope, and atmospheric monitor on Earth had recorded the same impossible reading. A global pause, total atmospheric stillness, followed by a pulse of energy that did not originate from the sun or anywhere inside the solar system. Professor Aso stared at the data stream on his monitor. The pulse wasn't just energy. It was information, a structured sequence, a repeating pattern, a signal, and the spiral formation in the sky, the geometric shape nobody could explain, contained the same sequence embedded within it. As if the spiral was not a shape and but a message, Aso isolated the repeating numbers from the frozen cloud pulses. The sequence was so precise it resembled a digital handshake protocol, something a computer would send when trying to establish communication. But communication with what? That's when the second anomaly hit. Just past noon, observatories in Hawaii and Australia detected a brief fluctuation in Earth's magnetosphere. Not a geomagnetic storm, not solar interference, but a harmonic vibration. A tremor in the planet's magnetic field that matched the exact timing of the atmospheric pulses, 61 seconds apart exactly. Aso's voice trembled as he sent the findings to the Global Emergency Network. The atmosphere froze. The magnetosphere echoed it. Something is synchronizing with the Earth. The room fell silent. Across the world, hundreds of experts were staring at the same impossibility. Clouds, air pressure, wind currents, electromagnetic fields, all moving in perfect lockstep with a signal coming from outside Earth. This wasn't an attack, it wasn't natural. It wasn't atmospheric physics, it was coordination. And then came the breakthrough nobody wanted. A small research lab in Finland discovered that the 61-second pulses were shrinking, not randomly, mathematically. 61,000 seconds, 60.998 seconds, 60.993 seconds, 60.987 seconds. The interval wasn't counting time, it was counting down. ASO replayed the frozen cloud footage frame by frame, his stomach tightening. The pulse inside the spiral wasn't just a flicker, it was a ticker, a planetary scale timer embedded into the atmosphere. But counting down to what? His assistant burst into the lab. "Sir, we found something." She handed him a tablet. On it was an overlay comparison, 2 spirals, one captured from the frozen sky, and the other from a reference file in a classified archive, buried since the 1990s. A picture from Voyager 1, a spiral recorded near the edge of the solar system, an unknown gravitational anomaly NASA could never explain. The patterns matched exactly. ASO whispered, "This signal, it's been here before." The countdown continued to shrink, and every scientist on Earth understood the truth at the same horrifying moment. The sky hadn't frozen because something arrived. The sky froze because something was coming back. As the pulses continued every 61 seconds, the world's attention turned from wonder to dread. Astronomers, meteorologists, and even amateur sky watchers recorded each flicker, each imperceptible wave. But no one could explain its origin. Professor Aso stared at the data, eyes wide. Each pulse wasn't random. Embedded within the flickers was a repeating sequence, mathematical, geometric, almost like language. It wasn't just a signal, it was a message. Meanwhile, satellite imagery revealed something even stranger. The spiral in the clouds began to expand outward, slowly, deliberately. The pattern stretched over thousands of kilometers, forming a network that aligned perfectly with the planet's major tectonic lines and ocean currents. It was as if the atmosphere itself had become a circuit board, and someone or something was powering it. Governments scrambled, military satellites repositioned. Airspace restrictions went into effect worldwide, but no missile, no aircraft, no satellite could interfere. The pulses didn't react to human intervention. They ignored it. On the third day, Aso noticed a new anomaly. Tiny sparks of light flickered within the spiral during each pulse. They weren't random. Mapping them out, he discovered they formed a sequence identical to prime numbers, but encoded in a pattern layered over the spiral itself. The implications were staggering. Prime numbers were universal. If a pattern this complex was encoded across the globe, it wasn't human. It wasn't terrestrial. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens experienced bizarre effects. Birds refused to move. Rain froze mid-fall. Even the wind seemed trapped, like invisible fingers held it in place. And some people reported hearing a low hum, a frequency that resonated in their chests, felt rather than heard. In secret, the UN convened a global summit, inviting the world's top physicists, mathematicians, and cryptographers. One cryptographer, Dr. Ilara Voss, finally spoke aloud what everyone had been thinking. "This isn't a warning. It's a countdown, and it's designed for us to decode it." Time became a cage. Every pulse ticked closer, each flicker a reminder that the sky was no longer passive. Something was coming. Something intelligent, something beyond comprehension. And then at the 5th pulse, the spiral shifted again. A new shape emerged, one that hadn't been in any known geometric reference. A triangle nested within a perfect circle, perfectly aligned with the equator. The Earth itself seemed to have been written into a message. Aso whispered, voice trembling. "If this is a message, it's not for us alone." As the 6th pulse approached, satellites detected a faint energy signature above the Pacific, a shimmering veil like a mirage hovering at the edge of the frozen clouds. The scientists' instruments failed to measure its density, speed, or even origin. It was there. It was conscious, and then a single line appeared within the spiral itself, visible only to those analyzing the pulse frames at extreme magnification. "Prepare, the sky watches." The world held its breath, because for the first time humanity realized the sky hadn't just frozen. It had become a warning system, and whatever was controlling it had been waiting for this moment for centuries. The pulses continued. Every 61 seconds, a subtle ripple ran across the frozen clouds. It wasn't random. It carried a pattern, something mathematical, precise, almost sentient. Professor Aso and his international team had never encountered anything like it. Satellites, drones, even high-altitude balloons failed to detect a physical source. Yet the data was unmistakable, a signal encoded into the very atmosphere itself. Then came the anomalies in time. Observatories in 3 different continents recorded identical micro-fluctuations in the pulse frequency. When overlaid, the sequences formed a fractal, a shape repeating at infinite scales, echoing the Fibonacci spirals seen in Part 1. It was as if the universe had handed them a blueprint. Dr. Elena Torres, a mathematician specializing in chaos theory, noticed something even stranger. The pulse contained embedded coordinates, not in kilometers or miles, but in quantum units. Measurements so small they were almost theoretical. She whispered to her assistant, "These aren't locations on Earth. They're pointing somewhere else, somewhere beyond." Meanwhile, civilians captured viral footage of the frozen sky. One clip showed a flock of birds hovering perfectly still over the Andes. Another revealed ocean waves frozen mid-crash. Everywhere, people began reporting a low hum in the air, a tone so faint it was felt more than heard. Aso turned to his team. "Whatever is doing this, it isn't subtle. It wants us to notice." The AI system they had installed to analyze the anomaly, originally designed for weather pattern prediction, began producing output never programmed. Symbols and graphs converged into 3 simple words, repeated endlessly across multiple simulations. "Look above us." The phrase terrified the scientists. It wasn't a warning, not exactly. It was a call, an invitation. Then, as if in response, the spiral in the clouds began to shift. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the frozen formation rotated. A perfect clockwise turn, 1 degree, one small step, and with it the pulses intensified, vibrating in a harmonic that seemed almost alive. Satellite feeds caught it, a faint glow tracing the spiral, illuminating the clouds like veins of light. It wasn't aurora, it wasn't lightning, it was something else, something intelligent. The world was watching now. Governments scrambled jet fighters. Scientists debated sending unmanned probes into the atmosphere. Yet the pulse, the signal, the spiral, they all continued unbroken, as if controlled by a single invisible hand. And then, in the middle of the Pacific, the pulse surged one last time. For exactly 61 seconds, the entire cloud formation shone. A perfect geometric alignment. A signal written into the sky for all humanity to see. And at the edge of the spiral, the AI detected what had been hidden all along. A sequence of numbers, coordinates, and a phrase encoded into light. Not words in any language, but something older, universal, and hauntingly clear. The message was simple: we have arrived. The silence afterward was deafening. No one knew who we were. No one knew how far this presence reached. And no one knew what would happen next. But the world had changed forever. For 2 days, the world watched in stunned silence as the frozen sky refused to move. Governments scrambled fleets of satellites and drones, but nothing penetrated the perfect stillness. Not wind, not birds, not even the faintest cloud drift. Professor Aso sat alone in his lab, eyes glued to the screens. Then he noticed it, a subtle shimmer along the edge of the spiral. Not random, but patterned. Every 61 seconds, a pulse ran through the clouds, brighter than before, forming shapes that defied human logic. He zoomed in and froze the frame. The shapes were symbols, ancient, cryptic, mathematical, but unmistakably intentional. And as he overlaid them with the Lagrange harmonic map, a horrifying realization struck him. The spiral, the pulse, the symbols, they were aligned to every major city on Earth, forming a network, a grid, a planetary interface. Aso's hands shook as he whispered, "It's a planetary command." Across the globe, other scientists confirmed the discovery. Satellites, drones, weather balloons, every instrument detected the same impossible signal. And in unison, every observer reported a chilling sensation. The world felt alive. Watching, responding. Suddenly, the pulse accelerated. Seconds, 45, 30, 10. The numbers weren't random. They were a countdown, but a countdown to what? Then the sky itself seemed to respond. The frozen spiral expanded, its edges glowing with faint iridescence. The clouds cracked open in perfect geometric precision, forming a massive rotating helix, a spiral that reached from horizon to horizon. And at its center, a point of absolute light, blinding in its intensity. A global transmission erupted on every channel. No words, no sound. Only a singular image of the spiral and a message that flashed across every device. You were chosen to witness the beginning. The world collectively froze in awe. Scientists, pilots, children, and leaders, all staring skyward, realizing that the universe had just sent a message. But from whom and why? Aso, trembling, typed a single command into his system: decode the spiral. His AI assistant worked furiously, calculating, cross-referencing, analyzing patterns in mathematics, astronomy, and human history. Finally, it spoke in a voice devoid of emotion, yet laden with revelation. The spiral is not a warning. It is an invitation. Humanity is being awakened to a higher level of perception. The sky paused to prepare you. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, as if obeying some unseen hand, the clouds slowly began to drift again. Birds resumed flight. Winds whispered across the forests, but humanity had changed. The sky was no longer just a sky. It was a message, a proof that the universe had eyes and perhaps a mind. Professor Aso whispered to himself, barely audible. We are no longer alone in understanding. The cosmos itself is alive. And as the world exhaled, the final pulse faded, leaving behind a sky that had frozen and now a sky that had spoken.